Hello and welcome to Riddle's channel. It's been such a long time since my last upload and I'm so happy that despite many setbacks, I can finally present you my newest video in which I'll work on restoring this lovely brunette version of the Cut and Style Barbie. Probably my favorite version of this doll line. There's a lot of work ahead of us and it's going to be a hefty video, so please make yourselves comfortable and allow me to guide you throughout the entire process. As always, let's begin with assessing the doll's condition. The glaringly obvious thing is of course her hair, or lack thereof, as these dolls are supposed to come with long, thick, luscious kanekalon hair. She is clearly a very loved doll. The rest of the doll is quite well preserved and besides a bit of dirt, she has only minor scratches and scuffs here and there. By testing her knees, I can tell that they can hold one bend, but the left knee has lost its ability to keep the second bend and retracts. The right knee, on the other hand, still holds. She also has her original vest, which is a variant where the back and front have the same iridescent foily material. The other variant comes with a plain neon yellow fabric at the back. Luckily, I thrifted her skirt online earlier, so I'm able to complete her look. And finally, she also still has most of her jewelry, which is this super 90s looking choker, and her two golden and black earrings, but is missing her ring, which is very typical for dolls from this age. I do have a couple of spare ones though, so we're good. Now, one concerning issue can be seen on her neck. As I pull her head back, there is a visible crack that we will need to treat to keep it from becoming worse. A lesser issue that is not very obvious is her left eyebrow, which has been slightly rubbed off at the end. As for her hair, there is truly no good way to salvage this, other than giving her a full reroot. It's good to see she brought a lot of fun to her previous owner, but she's been left with massive bald spots and a very erratic haircut. It seems like the backside has been spared of the scissor treatment, but I am noticing some glue seepage from under the velcro piece on her head. When I say her haircut is erratic, I mean it. Just look at this poor girl. She's kinda giving me young Heihachi Mishima vibes from Tekken. It would truly be difficult to try and style this hair in a way that all the baldness could be covered up. So I will solve this by simply rerooting her hair using these original Cut and Style hair refills. But before we jump into that, let's open this package up and take a closer look at what these refills were like back in the days. As we can see, there were extra accessories in addition to the hair pieces and a classic shell-shaped hairbrush. The packaging is quite beat up, so I have no regrets opening it up. At the moment, this is also one of the very few ways how to obtain long, doll-grade kanekalon hair. You can find them mostly on eBay or Etsy and sometimes score them for a good price. The package is now open, and it's interesting to see that the hair pieces were already a bit messy before they were even removed. I also think this package was somehow squished as the brush has multiple bristles bent at the bottom and sides. The contents also included 4 hair elastics, one for each of the 4 neon colors the doll variants wore. So these were a neon orange, pink, green, and yellow elastic. Sadly, these are almost always dried up and just crumble if you try to handle them in any way. One thing that cannot be missing from these 90s Barbie products is an instruction pamphlet. I really miss these little retro details. It's really cool to read through the instructions as they are actually quite detailed for a children's toy. I also love the illustrations that come in these. Let's go ahead and get the hair pieces out. Again, what's very typical of these 90s Barbie products is that they were attached incredibly well. Even here you can see thread, tape, plastic tabs, and twist wire all in one package. It definitely took me a while to remove all these, and because kanekalon is such a sensitive fiber, I really wanted to make sure I don't rush this to prevent the hair from sticking or to getting caught in any of these. Eventually I managed to dig them out, and here's how they look fresh out of the box, although fresh is probably not the right word to describe them. This little hair bow has velcro on it, which may or may not be a terrible idea. I like that they each come with a hair accessory matching the color scheme of the line. The other one is more like a scrunchie, but it's not very elastic, so I'm not sure how easy this is to use on a doll. And finally, here are the hair pieces. They're both roughly the same size, maybe one of them is just slightly narrower. Despite their age, they are still very soft and shiny, and I can't wait to see Barbie rerooted with these. I also just have to try attaching one to Barbie just to see how she'd look like. As you can see, the Velcro piece is covered by a cloth to keep it from sticking to everything, so we need to peel this back. Now we can just attach it straight to the Velcro piece on her head. And this concludes the restoration process, as this doll has long hair again. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Nah, you know I couldn't just end here. You know I'll go the whole 9 yards, so let's remove the hair refills and get to work. First things first, we need to give this doll a good cleanup to remove all the 30 years she's been carrying on herself. I forgot to mention I got her off of eBay as a part of a small 90s Barbie lot, and she traveled to me all the way from Italy, so she sure deserves a good spa day. I'm using my usual mixture of dish soap and hot water, and I'll soak her a bit to loosen the dirt. I think she's really happy already. As for her outfit, the top just needs a quick little wash, and I almost forgot to film it, so I'm doing it while washing. It was really quite clean, so I just used a bit of hand soap and warm water. Nothing extra is required, really. And that's it. I'll just leave it to dry. Next, I'll take a sponge with an extra drop of dish soap and make sure the doll is squeaky clean. I usually only use the soft side of the sponge, as the rougher side had scratched some parts of dolls before. You've probably noticed that I haven't pre-brushed the hair, nor have I cut it off yet. Because you know me, I try not to waste anything, and I will keep this hair for other projects. But for that, I will first wash it with shampoo and treat it with some conditioner. I also didn't do a dry brushing because I want to try if just wetting kanekalon hair and coating it with conditioner is enough to easily detangle it. So after the hair wash, I applied a generous amount of conditioner that I then worked into the hair really well. I then took a fine-tooth comb and started the detangling process. I always start with the hair ends and slowly work my way up to the roots. This is one of the ways you can reduce hair breakage and loss. Now, I immediately felt that the hair resisted the comb quite a bit, despite being fully coated with conditioner. There was also quite a lot of hair loss considering how little hair this doll was left with. Since I'll be chopping her hair off, I don't mind, but I can't imagine trying to detangle a doll with much longer and thicker hair. This just makes me believe even more that the best way to approach restoring kanekalon hair is to give it a dry brush with a bed brush or a good hairbrush specifically meant for very tangled hair. There is always going to be some hair loss, but unless the doll has bad rooting to begin with, the dry brushing is what I would recommend doing first. To finish off, I rinse some of the conditioner off and give the hair a bit of a boil wash to reset it. For kanekalon hair, I use hot water of less than 90 degrees Celsius, and I carefully brush the hair as I pull it out of the water for a pin-straight look. This is also the point where I want to take advantage of the hot water softening the doll's head, and carefully remove it. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Barbie has a crack on her neck, and it's making it very difficult to not break the neck entirely. My approach is to hold my thumb very firmly over the crack part while twisting and pulling the head off, to alleviate the pressure I'm putting on the neck, especially the cracked part. I got quite close to getting the head off, but it cooled off too quickly, and I need to reheat it in very hot water. I quickly dunked the head in cold water to cool off the hair to prevent my fingers from burning. Luckily, the second time it's going a bit better, and I'm able to remove the head and keep the neck in one piece. On the flip side, the crack did grow a bit, and it seems like it's ready to snap off if I push on it anymore. Another thing I do at this point is remove the earrings if the project requires it, but again, the head needs to be really soft, so I'm heating it up the third time. If the head becomes too stiff, it makes it very easy to break the earrings during this process. I will now put these aside for later. The repeated dunking in the hot water unfortunately caused the glue seepage to get worse, so I'll need to address that later. The glue seemed to have melted and was not holding the bond very well anymore. But that's a concern for later. At this point, I wanted to remove the hair. First, I put the hair in an elastic band to keep it from scattering all over the place. Afterwards, I trimmed the ends to level the hair off a bit, and I used this trimmer that we have retired to trim the hair off. I slightly prefer this to scissors, but honestly, either works well. It's not necessarily faster to cut the hair off this way, but I do feel though that the trimmer allows me to cut the hair closer to the scalp and thus keep more of the hair. And there we have it. Now I'll heat up the head again, to once again soften it and scrape out the remains of the hair plugs from the inside of the head. The reason I'm doing this is because getting the head to be soft helps prevent the vinyl from tearing and splitting. The water wasn't that hot anymore though, so you can see me handling the head with my bare hands, but just remember to be careful whenever you're using hot water. To scrape the hair plugs out, I used a pair of tweezers with sharper ends. You can of course use a screwdriver or any other tool that you prefer. Removing the plugs then revealed that the velcro piece is actually sewn to her head. Then I used the same tweezers to get all the hair plugs out of the head. And here she is after a successful buzz cut. The next step was figuring out what to do about the glue seepage. After I let the head dry out, it was clear that the old glue isn't working anymore, and I'll need to figure something out. I started by removing the seepage with some rubbing alcohol sprayed onto a cotton pad and carefully cleaned all around the velcro piece. My first thought was that maybe if I just apply some super glue around the edges, it will be enough to lock the glue in and I won't need to do more. I first tried applying it only to the side and back parts that were detaching from the head to see how it holds. Sadly, this didn't work well, and the glued parts not only remained detached but also hardened due to the glue. So, I decided to remove the velcro piece and the strings holding it all together. This wasn't as easy as I thought it'd be, as whatever glue Mattel used back then was pretty strong. I first tried rubbing alcohol to remove the glue before using anything stronger, but the cotton pad I used slowly stuck to the glue instead. Luckily, it made it rather easy to just scrape the glue off this way. The tough part to remove was the one where I applied superglue earlier, as it stuck to the vinyl in a surprisingly strong manner. Scraping wasn't working, so in the end I had to switch to pure acetone to carefully remove the superglue without touching the rest of Barbie's face paint. Acetone is quite good at dissolving superglue, and it worked in this case too. Now, the more challenging part was to remove the glue from the velcro piece itself, which was completely saturated with it and really sticky. As you can see, I needed multiple rounds of acetone rubbing to get the glue out, and it would stick to my fingers all the time. Eventually, the majority of the glue came off, but there was clearly some of it left deep inside the velcro piece itself that the acetone couldn't get to properly. I therefore mixed some OxiClean with hot water in a small jar where I soaked this piece overnight, hoping that the OxiClean would help. And this actually worked better than I expected, although nothing budged the superglue residue, so I definitely don't recommend using that for this purpose. There was still some very minor stickiness there, but it wasn't sticking to things anymore at all. Of course, now I needed to find a way to attach it back on, and I'm not sure what would be the best glue type for this, but I thought a basic contact adhesive might do the trick. I followed the instructions and applied a thin layer on both sides that I want to stick together, so in this case, both the head and the velcro piece. Then, I needed to wait 15 minutes to let the glue settle a bit before joining the two sides together. I carefully placed the velcro back onto the head, but somehow it ended up being longer than before, and it wouldn't fit nicely into the groove anymore. I needed to push on the glued parts for them to stick, so I tried to sort of push the velcro into place a bit, but I still ended up with this side part sticking out. Since it was also covered in the superglue, I just decided to trim it off. Sadly, the glue did not hold at all. I tried adding a bit more, and then impromptu decided to just sew the velcro to the head. I made sure the glued parts were pressed together well, and then started pushing the sewing needle through the vinyl head. Since there are no holes, I needed to utilize the table to get the needle to go through the thick vinyl layers. This part was really hard on the fingers. While I like finding the most efficient way to clean and restore dolls, sometimes it's the tedious and boring ways that bring the best results. It took some time, but I was eventually able to sew the Velcro piece to the head all around the edges, and this then held really well. The super glue will forever stay on here though. Next was the preparation of the hair refills. We were traveling a lot during this time between home and family, so some of the footage might not be the best as I had to improvise with my setup. But here you can see that I actually wet the hair pieces before trying to remove the Velcro bits. I used small scissors to carefully open up the stitching on the Velcro, hoping that I can then just peel it off and be left with the hair fibers. The scissor blade was a bit thick though, so I alternated between using those and a needle to rip the stitches. It definitely wasn't the most efficient way, but I eventually managed to remove the Velcro only to find another layer of stitching underneath. Using the same tools, I successfully removed that too, and just had to clean up the hair from the remaining threads. So the reason I wet the hair prior to this is because I thought it'll keep the kanekalon threads from flying around, but it actually made things worse. 0 out of 10 not recommend, as it causes more breakage this way. I still collected all the broken hair strands as I tried to waste nothing. Here's quite a collection of hair strands, and I also want to show you this little furry helper that joined me. She's a proper lap kitty and loves to hang out with people. She also loves taste testing doll hair for some reason, so I had to keep her from getting too close to the project. She's truly such a lovely companion, but now let's get back to work. So the hair in these refills is actually really long and is folded in half. When rerouting doll hair, I like to use the knot method, and I will use that folding point as an indicator of where to tie the knot. So all I did here was just a basic knot, but it's not always easy to tie these kanekalon hair strands, so I needed to be careful. As you can see, the knot isn't too neat, but it will be hidden inside the head, so that's not really a problem. I gently but firmly tug on the hair to tighten the knot, and then I tie a second one to make the knot bigger. This should keep it from being pulled out of the head. I tried to align the two knots perfectly, but I messed up and they ended up being right next to each other instead. So in such case, I just tie a third knot to join them. And this way I tied all the hair from the refill piece. Before rooting, I also rubbed the doll with a bit of alcohol just to make sure it's really clean. Here are all the hair plugs I made by tying the hair strands from the hair refill. All of the knots are directly in the middle, dividing one hair plug into two equally long parts. This one piece will then fill two adjacent holes on the doll's head. Let me show you how. I'll start by filling in the holes on the perimeter. So I prep the hole first with the tip of the needle to stretch it a bit to make it easier for the eye of the needle to go through. Then I take a piece of thread, creating a loop almost like a lasso, and push that through the needle. Then I insert one half of the plug through the loop thread and pull the thread out so that it guides the plug through the needle's eye. Kanekalon loves to get stuck sometimes, so you need to occasionally help it. Now that the hair plug is through, I just pull the needle out to get the hair plug through the hole. I like to hold onto the knot during this, just to make sure I don't accidentally pull it straight out with the needle. And again, sometimes with kanekalon, it's good to pull with your fingers because if it gets stuck, pulling with the needle can cause it to curl up or even snap. Next, I'll get the other half of the plug into the adjacent hole, doing the exact same steps as before. Do notice how slowly I am pulling the hair through the head, as the kanekalon plug gives a lot of resistance. But now that I have both ends in, I can just tug on the hair, and you can see that this way the hair plug should hold much stronger inside the head compared to using single hair plugs. There are of course many rooting methods, but I like this one a lot. Fast forward a bit and here's Barbie with the entire parameter rerouted. Looking back, I think I could have used thicker plugs here in the front, but otherwise it's pretty good. I'll continue routing the next row of holes and show you the results. I'm also debating whether I want to give her bangs because I think the side part would look great on her. What do you think? Wouldn't this look good? I'll decide about that later, but here's another rerouted row of plugs. It's not a huge difference at this point, so it might look like the progress is very slow. I will also leave the bangs part until the very end. Next, I'll fill in the sides of the head and then take care of the rest of it. Here she is after I did exactly that, and I also ran out of hair plugs from the first hairpiece at this point, so one piece is likely not enough to reroute a whole doll. However, I might have used slightly thicker plugs than I needed, but now I'll prepare the other refill hairpiece the same way. And if you're wondering, I braided it to keep it from getting disheveled during our frequent travels. This time I used a seam ripper to open up all the seams. It was much easier doing it this way, although it still took quite some time as I didn't want to rip too many of the hair strands in this process. At some places the hair got sewn to the velcro piece very tightly, so it's likely that some breakage was inevitable. I kept the hair dry this time and knotted the plugs the same way as I showed you before, so I won't include it again and I'll go straight to the routing part. I want to show you how difficult it can be to pull the hair through the head if the plug is on the thicker side. You might have noticed the hair slightly curled up here from the friction I caused with the needle earlier. And I went a little bit overboard with the amount of hair I used for some of the plugs. I continued filling in the plugs and slowly completing the center of the head, and eventually I came to a point where some holes were too far apart and the parting required much thinner plugs. So here I just made sure not to go too crazy with the amount of hair, but still use the same routing technique. There was also an odd number of the larger holes here, so I decided to fill these up using single plugs. And this is where the broken hair strands I collected earlier came in handy. I actually picked and carefully aligned every single hair strand to make these single plugs, so it was a long but relaxing process, and I felt good about not trashing the shorter hair pieces before. I think I used about 60 to 70 hair strands for each plug. I then tied the same type of knot on the very end of the plug and just used it to fill in one hole. But again, the method of rooting didn't really change at all. As long as the knot is big enough, the plug should also hold really well. I'm almost done with the long plugs as there's just a few left. And here's how it looks completed apart from the bangs. The hair is really thick, so I might have used a bit more than she originally came with. But I really like how the life is returning to her. I was debating whether I want to give her bangs, but since it's a restoration, I decided to do it, and maybe if I get another one of these dolls in the future, I might just reroute the other one without bangs. For the bangs, I decided to repurpose her old hair. Also, I needed to trim the ends of her hair a bit as there were a few longer pieces sticking out here and there. After the trim, I gathered her hair up in a bun to keep it out of the way for the next part. I also separated the front hair to be able to use it conveniently later. I tried to be a bit more careful with the thickness of the plugs this time, so I used a needle to divide the hair into smaller pieces. I tied these hair pieces up again in the middle as they will also fill up two adjacent holes. This was trickier to do due to their length, so I had to use a long needle to tie the knot easier. And I also removed any very short hair strands that were poking out. So I don't really recommend it as a hair fiber unless you absolutely want to use it on your dolls. With these, I did again 2 to 3 knots depending on how big I wanted the knot to be. And fast forward, here are all the plugs I needed for the bangs. I used the same rooting method, only this time the hair plugs are considerably shorter. This actually made it a bit more challenging, and I admit that using longer hair strands would have made it easier for me. But here are the first 2 plugs rerouted. And just a quick look at the completed rerouting of the bangs. But here are the first 2 plugs rerouted. And next, just a quick look at the completed rerouting of the bangs. These needed to be rethatched to mirror the original way of rooting. This is the reason why I gathered this front row of hair separately from the rest. So now it's time to unwind it and give it a very gentle brushing and a bit of combing as well. Now, the thatching part is always difficult to do with a camera setup, but I tried to do my best. Also, you have a couple of options how to do the re-thatching part. One way is to separate a full plug at a time from one side and bringing it over to the other side. Then you could take a full individual plug from the other side and bring it over to the first side. And continue in this alternating fashion. However, if the holes are uneven in any way, the final result may not look as neat. Same goes for another method where you take a full plug from one side and bring it over to the other side through an opposite plug divided into 2 halves. It's difficult to describe it, but think of it as one plug hugging the other plug. What I like to do though is a bit more laborious, where I take about half of one plug and cross it with about half of a plug from the other side. And sometimes I might even mix these methods if the holes are spaced too far apart or in an odd way. Often, when the hair is short, I will also tie the hair I've already thatched down to keep it from being messed up in the process. But yeah, I hope you can see at least somewhat from the footage what I'm doing here. To recap a bit, I'm taking a part of each plug, about half of it, and crisscrossing those. Please do let me know if you'd be interested in a more thorough and detailed explanation of just the methods I use. For example, would you like a video showing only rerouting and the various methods that can be used? Or a video showing various ways to rethatch without focusing on the whole restoration? Let me know in the comments below. Meanwhile, you can hopefully follow the progress on the rethatching of the bangs. I mentioned this earlier, but I wish I had used thicker hair plugs in this front row because they just barely cover the scalp. Luckily, it still works in this case, but I'll know better for the future projects. The hair is now technically completed, but before I cut and style the bangs, no pun intended, I will brush and wash the hair a bit. By this point of the process, I've worked on it for so long, and this head has traveled with me multiple times and was also taste tested by the friendly kitty that appeared in this video earlier, so I just feel like it needs to be freshened up a bit. But you don't necessarily need to wash hair after a rerouting. I do think that these lovely waves will go away, but I'll have to live with that decision. Let's have a last look at the waves here. I'm using only lukewarm water here, so there's a small chance we won't lose them, but let's see. I'm also keeping the bangs still tied up with the elastic. I give the hair the usual treatment, so a bit of shampoo and then she'll get a bit of conditioner. I'm very carefully washing the hair, mostly just in this pulling and squeezing motion. I will also comb through the conditioned hair, mostly just to make sure that I eliminate any knots that form during the rerouting process. Then the conditioner gets washed out, and I've decided to give a very brief and gentle boil wash, or more like a hot water wash. The water now is somewhere around 60 degrees Celsius, so much lower than I'd usually use for a boil wash. I do only 2 quick dips here, no additional combing. I then completed this part with rinsing the hair in cold water. It's not necessary, I just prefer to do it this way. Now the hair just needs to dry. We are not quite done yet though. There's still the cracked neck of her body. I forgot to record this, but I've applied a thin layer of superglue on the outside as well as a drop on the inside to keep the neck together. I will go one step forward though and apply some acrylic compound. I will now rough up the area a bit with a nail file for the acrylics to adhere better. Then I'll clean up the neck to remove any dust particles. This is the acrylic nails kit I've been using to fix broken necks. I used a small paintbrush that I dipped in the liquid, and then I dipped the brush in the powder. This immediately forms the acrylic compound. The liquid has an incredibly strong and unpleasant smell, so I recommend doing this in a very well ventilated area. I next covered the cracked parts with the compound and used a bit more liquid to shape it and smooth out the edges before it dries up completely. Speaking of which, here it is completely dry. I usually allow for up to 1 full day for this to happen. Last thing is to file, shape, and buff the area. I use 2 different types of nail files with different grits, first a rougher one and then a smoother one. I also make sure to shape the neck as close to the original shape as possible. Now I switch to a smoother file, which is the pink side. Once I'm happy with the results, I go on to finish it off with a nail buffer. This is the yellow part of the nail file I used before. And this looks pretty nice to me. Obviously not perfect, but much more functional. Now let's return to the head. The waves did loosen in the wash a bit, but the hair is not entirely straight. But what we need to do here is fix the left eyebrow, which had been partially rubbed off. I used acrylic paint in burnt umber to repaint the missing part. For this I used a tiny nail art brush and only needed a tiny amount of paint, which I took straight from the lid. I'm not a professional when it comes to painting though, so I use whatever I have to fix mistakes, as in this case my own nail. It looks good to me though, so this part is done and it just needs to dry. Now we can finally return the head to the body. I have a tiny glass jar which is filled with hot water that I will use to soften the head. This time, however, I'm only dipping the vinyl for a few minutes, not the entire head. The head popped back on right away, although I didn't realize it wasn't within the range of the camera, so it's not very clear. I also put the choker back on her neck before her head and gave her back her earrings. And of course, we need to complete her bangs, so away with the elastic. A quick combing to even out the hair fibers and a dip in hot water just to straighten out all the dents. Again, a quick combing, and here I can be seen using a brush handle to measure the approximate length I want for the bangs. At this point, I still keep the bangs a little bit longer than the final result will be. Then I cut into the ends to create a more natural look. We're almost there, my friends, but we need to curl these bangs before we call it a restoration. I like to use a straw, but instead of using it as a curler, I just place it under the bangs and pour boiling water from the top. I often tend to start pouring straight from the kettle and I forget how bulky it is. Luckily, I realized my mistake and transferred the hot water to a smaller container. This works much easier when you drop smaller amounts of hot water onto the bangs. After curling, I do the final adjustments to the length of the bangs and cut off any excess. I will then dry the bangs off camera. My goodness, this was one heck of a project, but we made it. May I present to you Cut and Style Barbie Brunette Restored. I'm honestly so proud of how she turned out, and I'm so happy that I can now add my favorite version of Cut and Style to my collection. To complete her look, I thrifted her original shoes online, and I already had her skirt from before. Oh yes, I also had an extra ring for her as well. Now let's look back at her humble beginnings back in the time she got to me. There was nothing that would have saved her hair, so the reroute was the best approach. Not only was her hair cut short, but many parts of her scalp were entirely without any hair. But now she's gotten back her former glory, and I think she's really happy about her new mane. She would originally come from the box with more pronounced waves, which I really lost in the final wash, but I can live with that. But we can't end this video without honoring her quirky little 90s gimmick, so let me open another refill pack I got off of eBay. I'm not guilty about doing that because the package suffered some water damage and developed moldy stains that I can't remove. Et voila! Here's Barbie with even more hair and a cute little hair bow. Let's have one more side-by-side comparison of the transformation. So, now I want to know your thoughts and feelings about this whole lengthy process. Do you think I did her justice? Would you have done something else? We of course all have our own preferred ways of fixing and restoring dolls, but I love hearing about your ways. Let me also know if you had any of the Cut and Style dolls and if you ever had a favorite out of these three. Were you Team Blonde, Team Brunette, or Team Redhead? I'm super curious. But now I think I need to wrap this video up, and I just want to thank you all for finding the time to watch this video. I hope you're all well and that this video can offer you some time to unwind from our busy lives. So please take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you in my next video.